So, good afternoon and welcome to 1194 of the series. We continue where we left off with Alfred North Whitehead and his philosophy of process. We came into number 4 here, Whitehead's philosophy and quantum mechanics. According to Heisenberg's interpretation of quantum mechanics, quantum states represent potentialities, some of which are actualized in acts of measurements. So the quantum mechanical universe is an interplay of potentialities and actualities. A measurement brings about, through the process of the collapse of a quantum state, what John Wheeler called an elementary quantum event. Such an event is a flash of actual existence. As soon as it appears out of the background of potentialities, it disappears back into the background of potentialities. This concept of elementary quantum events is remarkably similar to Whitehead's concept of actual entities. According to both quantum mechanics and Whitehead's philosophy, reality is not made of enduring objects, but of flashes of existence that disappear as soon as they appear. The main difference between actual entities and elementary quantum events is that the latter have no subjective aspect. They are all completely objective. This is due to the fact that quantum mechanics, like all of our science, is based on what Schrödinger called the principle of objectivation. By the principle of objectivation, I mean what is also frequently called the hypothesis of the real world around us. I maintain that it amounts to a certain simplification which we adopt in order to master the infinitely intricate problem of nature. Without being aware of it and without being rigorously systematic about it, we exclude the subject of cognizance from the domain of nature that we endeavor to understand. We step with our own person back into the part of an onlooker who does not belong to the world, which, by this very procedure, becomes an objective world. End of quote. Schrödinger's point is similar to what Whitehead called in his book Science and the Modern World the fallacy of misplaced correctness. When I look at a tree, the statement "there is a tree out there" is an abstraction. The concrete fact is that I see a tree out there. How very correct. Indeed, the first statement, "there is a tree out there," may not even be true. When I say I may be hallucinating, in contrast, the second statement, "I see a tree out there," is valid even if I'm dreaming or hallucinating. Schrödinger and Whitehead's point is that we are so used to mistake the abstract for the concrete, that the fundamental fact of experiencing is excluded from scientific analysis. With this exclusion, the universe becomes, for science, a lifeless object. The standard view of the universe as inanimate is a characteristic of the scientific method, not of the universe. Let us return now to the comparison between Whitehead's actual entities and Wheeler's elementary quantum events. Because of the limitations of Western science, that is, its adherence to the principle of objectivation, there is no way for any subjective aspect of elementary quantum events, if they have such an aspect, to appear in the quantum mechanical description. We can summarize the situation by saying that if we consider elementary quantum events as objectivized actual entities, the agreement between Whitehead and quantum mechanics is perfect. This conclusion opens the door to the following insight about the collapse of quantum states. The collapse is an atemporal process whose final outcome is the momentary appearance of an elementary quantum event in space-time. It may well be then that we cannot discover a mechanism for collapse because there is no mechanism, no process in time that corresponds to a collapse. 5. The potential and the actual. Now it's getting interesting. The final piece we need in order to solve the puzzle of the delayed choice experiments is an understanding of the nature of potentialities. While actual events take place in space-time, potential events do not. Potential events only refer to space-time locations. In Whitehead's system, the only real items are actual entities. Potentialities are like thoughts in the mind of God. Who is an actual entity? They are aspects of God that refer to space-time locations, but they do not happen in space-time. In the context of delayed choice experiment, this means since the photon is an elementary quantum event only when measured and a field of potentialities at all other times, nothing happens in space-time when it supposedly enters the apparatus. Finally, a comment about the role of speed of light. The speed of light limit refers to the passage of signals from one actual entity to another, not to the relationship between different aspects of one process of transition from potential to actual. Transitions from the potentials to the actual have a holistic character that seems like a superluminal connection. This is not in contradiction to special relativity, because it cannot be used to transmit information faster than light. The holistic character is a feature of EPR correlations. And as you might remember, hopefully, the Einstein-Podolsky-Rosen correlation. 6. A Whiteheadian view of delayed choice experiments. How does thinking about delayed choice experiments in Whitehead's philosophy differ from the usual way of thinking about them? The usual way of thinking, we envision a photon approaching the apparatus and, loosely speaking, having to make a decision as it enters the apparatus. Will it make a choice between path A and path B, or will it stay in a state of superposition of the two paths? If it stays in a superposition, it is hard to see how this can be changed later on, when the mounting of the mirror is changed while the photon is already inside the apparatus. The Whiteheadian way of thinking, listen now, according to Heisenberg's interpretation of quantum mechanics, and according to Whitehead's understanding of the ontological status of potentialities, as long as no measurements are made, nothing is happening in space-time. There are only potentialities for events to happen. Should a measurement be made, and potentialities do not happen in space-time, it follows that the statement, a photon is about to enter the apparatus, and this entails a decision between a choice of path and a superposition, does not correspond to anything in reality. The place of decision is the place of measurement. If the mirror is mounted on a spring and a path A is chosen for the photon, an actual entity or an elementary quantum event representing a photon will be created there. The self-creation of this photon will have to accommodate all the previous actual entities, including the properties of the mirrors in the apparatus. Very important, that is included. Because of the speed of light limit does not apply to the self-creation of a single photon event, a change of the mounting of the mirror along path A to a spring mounting leads to an instantaneous change in the state of photon from a superposition of paths A and B to either a detection by the vibration of the mirror if path A is chosen, or a non-detection at the mirror if path B is chosen. The puzzle that comes out of the usual mode of thinking simply does not arise. 7. Significance of quantum states. The holistic, seemingly faster than light feature will be demystified further by considering the following question. What is the significance of the abrupt change of the quantum state of the photon when the mounting of the mirror is changed? The answer to this question depends on the answer to a more general question. What is the significance of quantum states? Do they represent ontological information? That is, information about how the system is. Or epistemological information? That is, information about our knowledge of the system. There are strong arguments against the ontological interpretation. 1. The collapse occurs on hypersurfaces with T equals constants. Since these surfaces are observer dependent, whatever occurs on them cannot be an ontological description of the system. 2. Schrödinger's cat loses its mystery when the ontological interpretation is abandoned. The superposition of cat alive and cat dead then does not refer to the cat, but to the knowledge about it. There are also strong arguments against the epistemological interpretation. It's too subjective, If someone makes a mistake in reading the results of the measurement, does the quantum state of the system change? I suggest that the significance of quantum states is neither purely ontological nor purely epistemological. It is rather a synthesis of these two interpretations, namely, a quantum state of a system at a time t represents the knowledge that is available about the system at time t, regardless of whether anyone actually knows it. Applying this to the delayed choice experiment, the change in mounting the mirror brings about a change in knowledge that is available about the photon. It says nothing about the photon itself. Conclusions about this latest thing. Let us summarize. The seemingly weird aspects of quantum mechanics, such as delayed choice experiments, indicate the need for a paradigm shift. Whitehead's process philosophy is a strong candidate. Within its framework, with the addition of the understanding that the speed of light limit applies to propagation of signals, not to transitions from the potential to the actual. These seemingly weird aspects have simple, straightforward explanations. Space and time apply, and this is to be listened to, apply to the ordering of things and events in the actual world. A potentiality is neither thing nor an event. Hence, it does not exist in space-time. Therefore, the process whereby an electron or a photon appears as an elementary quantum event in space-time is not temporal. Just like Plato's becoming, it is an atemporal process whose final outcome is the appearance of an event in space-time. 3. The significance of quantum states. A quantum state of a system at a time t represents the knowledge that is available about the system at time t, regardless of whether anyone actually knows it. I will also add some of chapter 2 here, Whitehead's theory of perception by Joachim Klose. Abstract, like Locke and Hume, Whitehead accepts that the stream of thought has temporal extension. Perception, however, does not take place in a non-temporal moment. It rather takes time. Following William James, Whitehead calls this duration specious present. It is a prerequisite of perception in the specious present that not only the reality of the percipient event, but also of the perceived event is temporally extended. The problem of how distinction in the stream of events appear and why the apparent world does not collapse in one moment disappears when we observe that the present itself is duration, and therefore includes directly perceived time relations between events contained within reality. The temporality of nature is one of the major insights which shapes Whitehead's whole metaphysics. Classical physics has reasons to disregard temporality and to use a continuous concept of time. But both science and metaphysics start from the same given groundwork of immediate experience, and in the main proceed in opposite direction of the diverse task. In his metaphysics, Whitehead tries to avoid any bifurcation between a perceiving consciousness and an independent reality. He develops a theory of perception more general than those of British empiricists. This paper shows how changes in the understanding of perception provoked Whitehead's epochal theory of time. As a result, the ultimate constituents of reality are no longer non-temporal events, but actually occasions which possesses spatiotemporal extensions and creativity. Thus causality becomes a real feature of the world rather than a judgment of consciousness. One, anti-bifurcationism. In his publication on natural philosophy, the concept of nature and the principle of relativity, Whitehead was concerned only with nature, that is, with the object of perceptual knowledge, and not with the synthesis of the knower with the known. This distinction is exactly that which separates natural philosophy from metaphysics. Nature is in a sense independent of thought, and therefore independently describable. We can think about nature without thinking about thought. The sciences are not concerned with the reasons of knowledge, but with a coherent explanation of nature. They try to understand how the events of nature are related to each other. The development of physical theories, especially the introduction of the transmission theory of Newton's mechanism, resulted in a bifurcation of nature. Whitehead delivers two similar formulations of such bifurcation, which he both rejects categorically. One, the distinction between the events of nature and the events as they are formulated in scientific theories. Two, the distinction between the events of nature as they exist by themselves and as they appear to us. The first concept of bifurcation maintains a pure conceptual existence of physical entities. On one hand, there are phenomena, and on the other, logical terms of scientific formula. Whitehead firmly rejects the theoretical postulate of physical objects as atoms or molecules. Each system of notations represents the relationship between its terms and makes statements about the truth or falsehood of the phenomena. An atom or a molecule, as a term of a chemical formula, represent the sum of all true statements of a phenomenon which has expected properties. Scientific laws, if they are true, are statements about entities which we obtain knowledge of as being in nature. If entities to which the statements refer are not to be found in nature, the statements about them have no relevance to any purely natural occurrence. Here Whitehead supports a simple realism. Concepts, as insofar as they are true, refer directly to the phenomena, otherwise they are nonsense. Well-established concepts of science refer to the factors which will be found in nature. Scientific theories represent the relationships between these factors. They do not represent the phenomena completely, but rather under certain considerations. Reality is the unit of fact which includes many factors. The factors are the aspects of reality which we perceive. Natural philosophy is concerned with the totality of fact. Quote here, "For natural philosophy, everything perceived is in nature. For us, the red glow of the sunset should be as much part of nature as are the molecules and electric waves by which men of science would explain the phenomenon." Scientific concepts and theories are attempts to structure this totality. They do not form a reality in opposition to the nature of reality. They are derived by logical abstraction from nature. Whitehead argues against the bifurcation of reality into a mathematical logical world and the apparent world. Nature is thus including individual experiences, so that we must reject the distinction between nature as it really is and the experiences of it. Our experiences of the apparent world are nature itself. The fundamental concepts of physics are not free inventions of the mind, but logical interpretations, logical abstractions from sense experiences. One of the main pillars in Whitehead's natural philosophy is the method of extensive abstraction. The method is a logical model which links the content of perception as a whole with the conceptual framework of science. By the method of extensive abstraction, sense objects are arranged in converging series wherein each object contains a smaller one. For example, the sense object house contains the sense-object cabinet. The sense-object cabinet contains the sense-object bottle, and so on. Finally, this series is perceived to terminate in a point or some other basic element. In this way, Whitehead is able to connect scientific objects like electrons or atoms with sense objects. He distinguishes between them, not as does Newtonian or Einsteinian physics of the all bifurcationary basis, according to which the colors and sounds are sense data, and the electrons and protons are unobserved, postulated entities too small for senses to detect, but upon the basis that both atoms and sense data are immediately sensed adjectives of immediately sensed events. The difference between them being that the adjectives, which are colors and sounds, depend upon the relation between the events, which is their sensed locus, and the percipient event, which are scientific objects, such as electrons, are more persistent and are a function only of the events, which are the sensed locus. The second formulation of bifurcation is a direct consequence of the first. After separating the realm of apparent nature from the realm of physical description of this nature, Locke asked how both realms could be connected. The question arises as to how the unperceivable atoms, which, according to Newton's kinematic theory, move in absolute space and constantly perish time, are connected with our space-time experience. Locke realized that a moving particle can only set other particles in motion and does not produce redness, for example. Therefore, he thought that there are secondary qualities which are not in the things by themselves, but rather psychic additions of the mental substance of an observer. The entities have the power to produce ideas in our mind. Locke wrote, "The power to produce any idea in our mind I call quality of the subject, wherein that power is. The primary qualities like form, strength, and extension are in the things alone, and cannot be separated from them. The secondary qualities such as colors, tones, and tastes are not in the entities, but the entities have the power to produce these impressions." The secondary qualities, which do not exist in nature, are supplied by the mental substance. Whitehead calls this theory the theory of psychic addition. To make this form of bifurcationism understandable, one is forced to use a causal theory. The British empiricists did not require causal explanation for touch perceptions. These touch perceptions are perceptions of the real inertia, whereas the other perceptions are psychic additions, which must be explained on the causal theory. The preference of touch perceptions over visual perceptions is a result of materialism of the 18th and 19th century, is not acceptable to Whitehead. One could think that touch perception in combination with muscular effort should give reliable information about reality. But for Whitehead, information derived from touch is just as free from any psychic addition as information derived from vision. This means, quote here, a refusal to countenance any theory of psychic additions to the object known in perception. In the notion of an apparent nature, one should erase the attribute, for there is but one nature, namely the nature which is before us in perceptual knowledge. End of quote. The senses provide the mind with information which does not need any additions. Sense data are the ultimate things which we know about nature. The splitting of reality into primary and secondary qualities has transformed the question of how consciousness and nature are related into the question of how consciousness and the human body are related. In addition to the first bifurcation between scientific concept and sense perception, a second bifurcation appears between sense perception and reality itself. This results in the banishing the observer, mental substance, out of nature. Berkeley concluded correctly that the observer can have knowledge only of the sense impressions, but not of the objects which produce them. The knowledge of reality now requires a theory, Newton's theory of transmissions. To avoid the contradictions in Locke's theory, Leibniz developed his monads. Leibniz noted that the material substances, by definition, are located in space, and hence their action upon anything else can occur only in space. The mental substances, on the other hand, are not in space. Instead, for them, space is merely a relational item within the notion of consciousness. Whitehead calls this assumption that something has a fixed position in time and space the fallacy of a simple location. If the material substances are only in space, then a material substance can only act upon a material substance, but not upon mental substance. It follows that either the material substances must be brought within the space in the field of awareness of mental substances, or the mental substance must be defined in terms of the material substances. The latter is impossible for Leibniz, because he would be confronted with Locke's and Hobbes' problem. Accordingly, he concluded that space is a relational item within the consciousness of the observer, conceived as a windowless monad. The natural philosophies of the 17th century were mistaken in taking the abstract for the concrete. This is the example of the fallacy of misplaced concreteness. Quote, "There are dualists who accept matter and mind as on an equal basis, and the two varieties are monists, those who put mind inside matter and those who put matter inside mind. But this juggling with abstractions can never overcome the inherent confusion introduced by the ascription of misplaced concreteness to the scientific scheme of 17th century. With his anti-bifurcationism, Whitehead shows complete commitment in his efforts to avoid any separation between the entities of reality. Reality as a fact is a unit of factors, and we are one of them. Whitehead, like Einstein, is a realist in the sense that reality for him is given independently of consciousness. But there is only one nature. There is no such thing as independent reality. There is no reality behind our perceived reality, which we try to reach by improving our perception systems. What we perceive is reality. The only thing we can do is to analyze our perception. The only material which we can work with is sense data and reflections on those. We have an experience of reality that is wider than our sense perceptions, which are representations of aspects of this reality. Therefore, we can perceive a difference between our model of reality and the event from which we have taken the different aspects to form this model. But sometimes the difference seems to pale into insignificance. At this point, philosophers come into danger of confusing their model of reality with reality itself. The whole discussion so far leaves the question open whether Whitehead can indeed avoid bifurcations in such a radically empirical scheme. Northrop argues he cannot, because he cannot account for causality. The concept of causality in science or physics, Northrop concludes, is not given empirically as a deliverance of sense awareness. This means that Whitehead has not succeeded in avoiding bifurcation. I hold Northrop is wrong because he does not take into account Whitehead's theory of perception. This will be discussed in detail below. The specious present. If we want to understand what time is, we must first answer the question, what is the origin of our experience of the past? From where do we get the meaning of the term time? William James suggests that simple sensations are abstractions of complex reality. Our concrete states of mind are representations of objects with some amount of complexity. Part of the complexity is an echo of the objects just past, and to a lesser degree, perhaps the foretaste of those just to arrive. He also states that we have a constant feeling sui generis of the past. James notices, like Locke, that a constant stream of ideas passes through our mind. If the present thought is of A, B, C, D, E, F, G, the next one will be of B, C, D, E, F, G, H, and the one after that of C, D, E, F, G, H, I. The lingerings of the past dropping successively away, and the incoming of the future making up the loss. This is from James. But if you look at our idea of the time stream, what are we talking about when we talk about the present? What does it mean when we say now, as if to capture the present moment? If we have spoken the word, it is already past. When can we speak of a present moment? The present, only a point in the stream of time, appears to be an abstraction. We know that it must exist, but the fact that it does exist can never be a fact of our immediate experience. We can only say that the sensible present has duration. James calls the sensible present, which has duration, the specious present. Different authors have studied the duration of such a specious present as James's time. Using different experimental techniques, they had come to the conclusion that a minimum amount of duration we can distinctly feel lasts 1/500th of a second, and the maximum amount is 6 to 12 seconds. I think we continue with this later on. I say thank you very much. Whitehead's theory of perception, it leads later on to the ideas of Henry Stapp and a foundational note for quantum physics and quantum mechanics. And he makes a similar point, Whitehead, as the Navajo Indian. They only use what we know, the epistemological part, not what we sort of hypothesize to be of a transcendental reality. Transcendental reality is actually what we usually call the real world. But looking into Whitehead, we slowly understand that is not the real world at all. What it is, we're coming back to, but it's getting quite interesting so far. Why not say it's getting hot in here with all the atoms and electrons moving about? I say thank you very much and have a very pleasant afternoon. Bye bye for now.